Hey everybody, it's Brant Frost. I hope you all are doing well. Today I'm joined by Norine Cantor. She is running for second vice chair of the Georgia Republican Party. Norine, tell the folks about why you're running and a little bit about your background of service and activism.
All right. First of all, thank you, Brent, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. The reason I'm running is because I don't believe the Georgia GOP has given we the people a voice in what they are doing. There's no transparency about money or anything. We have no idea. Um, I've worked on many campaigns. Um, let's see, quite a few actually, and the last one was John Gordon, and I was his grassroots advisor. And I went to Leadership Institute, so I know how to run a grassroots from the bottom up and everything that's involved in it. You recruiting the people, vetting helping them however they need the support, getting them elected, and the big one is holding them accountable. So that's what I'm really passionate about is getting grassroots in to office so we can get rid of some of these rhinos down at the Capitol.
What would you say would be some of the ways to change things for the better?
Well, first of all, we need a new chairman and get rid of all the establishment down at the Capitol because they're not doing us, we the people, any good. And we need people that care about the people and will support the grassroots. When I ran last year for House District 30 against Derek, which is a 34% voting score, I got no help from the Georgia GOP, not a lick of help. So I ended up doing it myself. But I've ran many campaigns by myself, so I knew what I was doing. So what I did is when I went out and campaigned, it wasn't to talk bad about him. It was just to make people aware of what a voting score is. People don't understand how these people vote down there, and they don't understand what a conservative voting score is. And a 34 is with voting with the Democrats, and we got enough of those down there. I think we have only maybe two or three down there at the Capitol that actually vote the right way for we the people. We need to change that.
Why do you think, what would be your thought about how how to structure the party in such a way as to be able to help candidates in the primary? Because you were running in a Republican primary,
I
and of
did.
course the long-standing policy of the party is to not engage in a primary against one candidate or another, regardless of their voting score. So, what would be your thought as to the structural changes on how to bring that about? Because obviously you're not saying that your race was the only one they should have engaged in. You would like to see this on a broader scale. What would be the mechanism? Because it's easy to say we have a problem, but what would be your solution? How would a candidate who seeks the support of the Republican Party in Georgia, how would they go about requesting it? How would the party go about granting it? Would it be a vote by a convention, a vote by the state committee? What would be the parameters?
It would be the accountability rule. They would have to agree on the Republican rules and policies. If they don't agree with them, then they have to run as an independent. We've got enough so called R's that run and then they get into office and they turn into Democrats. So the accountability rule is a big one. After that, then you reach out to the county chairs and other groups and find out what people are interested in running for office. That's when you meet with them and you decide, well, we'll see. And then you vet them to see what's going on in their background, what's going on in their lives, if they can handle it, if they know how to fundraise, if they know how to door knock, and all kinds of questions. And then once they pass all that, then if they're accepted and they pass the accountability rule, then I think that the Georgia GOP should support them. I don't care if they're running against another Republican because my Republican that I ran against, he was a rhino. We got to get rid of the rhinos. We're losing people at the Capitol every election cycle, and we're not going to be in the majority in much too longer. So that's just it. We've got to get rid of the rhinos.
What would you do about deciding, when a candidate, what would be the criteria that you would use for deciding if a candidate needed to be disqualified and not allowed to run again in the next election?
Well, we'll take my House rep. He's at 34, at least he was. I haven't seen the new voting score, but if he's even in the 40s, he should not be allowed to run as a Republican. He should run as an independent.
So the legislative priorities of the Republican Party could be used as a scorecard, and if you didn't support those policies, didn't sponsor the bills, that kind of thing, then if you drop below a certain level, a certain number, you would automatically be eligible for for a vote of disqualification.
Yes. If they
Okay.
don't agree with the party rules and don't abide by the party rules when they're in office, and we have to hold them accountable, and if they don't get their score up or care about we the people, they're not a true Republican. We've got enough R's. We need real R's.
Yeah. This is something which is always fascinating to me. Um, there are different ways of looking at who a representative should represent. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. What would some people say that a representative is supposed to represent the people of his district, in the sense that he's supposed to try to figure out, presumably, what a majority of them feel about an issue. Then you say, well, the people in general aren't deciding, it's the voters. The voters say who voted in an election. So you can say, well, what do the voters who vote in the general election think? But a lot of guys are in safe Republican seats, so it's really the primary voters. So you might look at the ballot questions and say, well, this is what they want. Or you could say, or a candidate could say, well, I owe them my best judgment. If I think something is dumb because I have more information or because I just think it's a bad idea, then if they don't like it, they can vote me out in the next election. There's all sorts of different theories about when who we the people are, and whether or not a representative is a spokesman representing the majority of his constituents, or an ambassador, whether he's an ambassador or a fiduciary. Fiduciary it owes his best judgment to his client, and then they can decide whether or not to renew his contract. So how do you see that role? Because we, the people, I mean, you can look at public opinion polls. A majority of Georgians, at least in the abstract, favor more gun control. But of course, we do not, as Republican primary voters and as conservative activists. So, who is we, the people? There's the intelligent minority, which is well informed on these issues, that's very active in politics. And then there's the, media propagandized majority that can be swayed by some really bad ideas. Where do you draw the line? Who is we the people? And is your role as a representative, Norine, to be a fiduciary and give your best service and then let the chips fall the way it may? Or do you think it's more of an ambassadorial role?
That's a good question. I think it's more of an ambassador role, because we work for the people. We have to serve the people. So I guess it's more like an ambassador.
I see what you mean. So so who do you think that you're representing as the ambassador? The primary electorate, the voters who vote in the primary, who are the de facto electorate, since the general election, as you said, in most of these seats is a safe Republican or Democrat. Would you say that's your constituency you're representing?
The people in your district, yes.
Well, no, I just mean is that the on most issues, the people in a district, um, and the people in a district tend to be more moderate on the issues and less conservative than the primary electorate. The 10% of voters who go out and vote in the primary are far more conservative than the electorate in general. So if we were going by the wishes of the majority of the electorate in general, you would be a much more moderate state legislator than if you were going by the wishes of the primary voters, the 51% or more who elected you. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, you would have to represent all the people. I mean, there's going to be people that want you to do this, want you to do that, but you have to do what the majority of the people request you to do. Like, for instance, if there's a bill down at the Capitol and you get a lot of calls saying, please vote no, and you vote yes, and it's a really bad bill, then you're not supporting your constituents or we the people.
what if it's a good, I could foresee many situations, as I'm sure you, that when the Democrats would organize, and they've done this in the past, and lobby against voting for some really conservative bill, it's entirely possible that even in a district like yours, the Democrat calls could outnumber the Republican calls saying, please don't vote for this horrible bill, like a constitutional carry bill. The Democrats would flood you with calls saying, please don't vote for this bill. And and then what do you do in that situation?
You have to follow your heart and what you sign the pledge on to be a Republican. If you feel strongly and everybody else doesn't, but you know it's right, sometimes you got to stand for what's right, even if you have to stand alone. So I would say that, you know, you got to have what's right in your heart um, with a bill. Like, you can't just be a yes man or a no man. You've got to vote how the people will expect you to vote, or you have to vote with the values of the Republican Party.
So the main thing then is to be a fiduciary rather than an ambassador, to do what you think is right, and then to let people know before you get elected, this is what I'll do if I'm elected, and then to do it. And if the majority of people later on say, well, we don't like that, you say, well, you can vote me out. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's take, for instance, Trump. He won only by 2% in the state. That's horrible. I mean, that is really bad. And we lost two representatives. That's really bad. But Trump, even though people don't really like him, he does what he feels is right for the country, and he doesn't care what people think. He stands for what is right all the time. It's promises made, promises kept. And if you get on a campaign and you say you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and then when you get in office and you totally do the opposite, yeah, you need to be voted out because you just lied to the people.
What happened? Yeah. This is a problem that a lot of Republicans face because people dislike Democrats. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people dislike the Democrats and vote us in. But there are many issues where the American voter is objectively not in agreement with us, but they keep voting for us anyway because the Democrats are more scary and ridiculous. But the majority of Americans do not share the Republican opinion on a lot of very important issues. They're not as pro-life as we are. They're not as pro-gun as we are. They're not as pro-free market as we are. They're certain, they're not, they're far more sympathetic to the welfare state. And yet we continually do what, we more or less do what we think is right anyway, even though those are minority positions. And if there was a referendum in your district on the issue, we would probably lose it. Yet we do what we think is right anyway. So I think maybe your second answer would be, first you were talking about being an ambassador, but I think maybe on reflection, perhaps you might say that we are fiduciaries, if for no other reason than that we owe people our best judgment. And the fact, frankly, that if we were just weather vanes for public opinion, we would be Democrat. We would be voting on Democrat issues a lot of the time, not the most extreme Democrat positions, but, if you went by popular opinion, you, Norine, as a state rep, you would have to be pro gun control, at least partially,
No,
pro big government. I
no,
mean, but seriously, if you just went with what 51% of voters said they liked, you would have to be pro gun control, pro, bigger government when it came to social welfare spending. You would be against, the trans agenda, and you would be against open borders. But other than the trans issue and open borders and defunding the police, there aren't a lot of issues where you have a solid majority of Americans or even Georgians agreeing with Republicans on things. Nobody wants tax increases, but
no.
in general, there's a lot of moral and social issues, as you know, where the left has propagandized a majority of the American public into agreeing with them, at least superficially. So if you're going to be a principled conservative, that would almost require you to be a fiduciary, to give people your best judgment and say, if you don't like it, vote me out in the next election, but I'm not going to be a weather vane of public opinion.
Exactly. You got to stand for what is right. I would never vote on any of those bills that if they came up, anything like that. Nope. I will stand on my morals and my principles, even if I have to stand by myself. So I would never be a part of that mess. And something the Democrats do that we Republicans don't do very well is when they get on something, they stick together. What the Republicans do, they get out there and they fight amongst themselves constantly and can never get together on anything. And that really hurts us.
What would you say is the biggest reason why we should get, because I've talked to many candidates, interviewed many candidates. You're actually the first candidate who is openly stating, even though all the candidates pretty much have a preferred candidate for state chairman, you're the first one who has done the audience the courtesy of being open about it and saying, I prefer this candidate over that candidate. What would you say are some of the reasons why you support David Cross for chairman over Josh McCoon?
Because I feel that if we get reelect Josh, our 2026 is going to be done. Because look, we got 2 Democrat senators. What makes us think that it's going to change under Josh? He says he got Trump elected. I'm sorry, he didn't get Trump elected. All the grassroots in Georgia, door knocking, calling, being part of Trump Force 47 did it, not just Josh. He might have got the money from the RNC, but he didn't get out and knock those doors. He didn't go call those people. He didn't go to the Trump rallies. He didn't do anything like that. He didn't participate in the fundraising and all that stuff. Not at all. It's we, the people in Georgia, that got Trump elected. So there you go.
That's interesting because the chairs usually spend most of their time fundraising, and there are all these people who said that Josh called them and asked them to give, and they gave money because of that. So you think maybe that might be a bit of an overstatement as far as his lack of involvement?
No, I don't really think so, because we put on a fundraiser up in Banks County with Ron and other people, and we raised all that money for the electors in Georgia that were on trial because of Trump. Josh was invited, but Josh didn't come. He didn't want to be a part of that. So yes, that makes me think that he only cares about the establishment. He don't care about we the people at all.
You don't think something like $1 million that the party spent, or some huge amount of money that he raised for the electors, that doesn't count for anything?
He raised him, but he didn't act like he cared about we the people. He
So,
Josh
so, so,
for him.
so, so $1 million is not as useful to the electors as giving a vibe that, there's on the, you raise $50,000, he raises a million, and he's not helping.
He could be helping in his own way. I won't say that. If he raised $1 million for the electors, good for him. But did he stand up against Fannie Willis? Absolutely not.
Seems like $1 million is a whole lot of standing up.
I don't think so. He never put a statement out saying he stands against Fannie Willis.
Do statements pay for lawyers?
We got enough lawyers. You know what? They say.
Words are cheap. Words are cheap. Lawyers have to be paid. Legal filings have to be filed. For example, I'm sure you would appreciate people appreciating you helping to raise $50,000, and would be grateful that you were willing to make that effort. If you should be commended for raising $50,000, surely Josh deserves at least his equal amount, or maybe 20 times as much, for helping to raise $1 million, if we're going to fall a fair comparison.
Okay. I'll give you that. If he raised money and he did good with it, then why isn't he transparent with we the people, letting us know where that money comes in and goes out?
He talks about it's on the state party, not state party, it's on the FEC website for
I'm
legal
not
services.
talking about the FCC. I'm talking about the books. Lori can't see the books at all. She doesn't know what comes in, what goes out. She only gets to see the total. That's the problem.
Then why do they put itemized reports on the FEC website?
Talk to Lori.
By definition, somebody is filing itemized reports if the FEC, which is public information, has that. And since she has to sign off on it at some point, she is seeing something, I imagine, beyond just the general information. She'd have to, because otherwise she'd be possibly committing a crime, signing something she hasn't read over. We don't think she's doing that.
No, I'm not going to speak for Lori. I just know that she says she doesn't get to see the book. She doesn't really know where it comes in and where it goes out. So you need to have Lori on and have her explain that.
We talked to her recently, and she did talk about that. We're going to release that interview soon. She talked about that and some of the things and she also talked about how it's difficult. Financials are difficult because not all the information can be released, for example, or at least they choose not to. For example, you could itemize payroll expenses by saying who was getting paid what, how much the staff. The party only has two staff currently, but
Mm-hmm.
you could say how much you're paying them a year in the itemization, but that's considered something. They choose not to do that, and I haven't heard anybody say that necessarily they should. So Lori at least doesn't think that we should tell the public how much we're paying our office manager a month. That's between her and us. It's not, nothing to do with the public. That was her thought on that.
That's an interesting thought because the GOP, the Georgia GOP Inc. is a corporation, and corporations put out their schedules of what they pay people on their websites. So shouldn't we have that same transparency with our Inc. if it's Georgia GOP Inc.?
The L the LLC. That's interesting because I know my business is an LLC. We're incorporated in Georgia. We don't have any public filings about how much our payroll is, and I don't think, and I'm not aware of other businesses like ours that are like that.
Okay.
Did the business you worked for, back when you were working, did they put out how much they paid their employees?
Oh, absolutely. The higher staff, yes.
No, I'm talking about junior staff, people, office managers and assistants, that kind of thing, the lower level staff, not like the CEO or the director board, but because we only have two employees at the state party currently, and they're both serving, in administrative roles, the medium, small administrative roles. So usually, at least Lori said that that's the kind of information that you don't necessarily go around sharing with everybody, with the
Yeah,
world.
okay. I'll give you that.
What would you say? How would you like to enact into permanency the accountability rule? Long term, beyond just a resolution, to kind of institutionalize it. As we've seen with the Trump administration, vibes are fleeting. If the first Trump administration was vibes based, this second Trump administration is very much results based. Get the people into the administrative state, change the system, change the rules, cut out drain the swamp from the inside. It's not enough just to put out cool stuff, edgy stuff on social media. We actually have to get in there and get a grip on it. So how would you institutionalize this idea and you get it in there in a permanent way with the rules? What would be the system you would set up? How would we institutionalize this?
Well, you would have to get a committee for rules, and then you would have to change the rules, and then they would have to pass by majority. Because the rules need to be changed. What's the last time they've been signed off in, I don't know, 21, 20, whatever. And
Yes, the 2020, yeah.
yeah, so the rules that are 2020 are old. We need to have new rules, and we need to put the accountability in there. And they need to understand that if they don't follow our rules and agree to our platform and our principles and our morals, that they can't sign that accountability, and we will not be helping them.
What would you say uh, is the best way to keep the legislature from taking some kind of action to counteract that effort? If, for example, they were to abolish primaries and go to an open primary like California has, a jungle primary, we have top two vote getters in the June or May election, regardless of party, go to a runoff, kind of like the special election model where they go to a runoff in November. What could we do to negotiate, if you will, with the legislature to prevent them from just abolishing primaries if we were to do something like this with the accountability rule?
Well, first of all,
Talked about this with a lot of people, so I'd like your
yeah,
thought too.
we need to close our primaries. They are just a disaster. Democrats come in and vote and get whatever person they want. They really skew the elections. So we need to close primary. And I say, if we put the accountability rule in, stand strong and fight for it. If it's right, we'll fight for it. Whether lawyers come in and just decide to take us to court or whatever, we have to stand strong if we want conservatives in office, just like Joanna did in Coosa County.
Well,
That
yeah,
was
yeah.
That was
what if the legislature abolishes primaries though, like I said, and goes to an open primary model like they have in California, where where you just run regardless of party? What would be how would we prevent what could we do to prevent the legislature? My thought is that you can't if if the legislature thinks that this would be used on them, they will fight us much more ferociously. So if you started out with, say, it being a federal and statewide thing, that the rule we would adopt says that this will only be used for statewide offices or federal congressional offices, then the legislature might be persuaded to not abolish primaries altogether. But I'm just concerned that the legislators will say, I'd rather take my chances with an open primary because in their mind, they're thinking, well, I'm the incumbent. I'm very well known. I'll definitely make the top two. And then in November, I'll either beat the Republican who got in the runoff with me because I'm more moderate than he is. And the Democrats with a vote for me or just skip the general election elector is much more moderate. So they tend to favor the incumbent in most cases because the most incumbents are more moderate. Or on the other direction, they'll say, well, I'll either beat the Democrat because I'm a Republican in this Republican seat, or I'll beat the more conservative Republican because the electorate is in the general election is more moderate. So in that sense, it would help them politically. It'd be more expensive, but it would help them. I'm sure that most legislators would rather take their chances in a jungle primary than try to persuade conservative activists that their rhino voting record isn't so bad. So they'd rather take the chance. What can we do to prevent them? And my thought is that we, at least for the short term, would need to leave the state legislators out of the picture. Otherwise, they'll just self-protect. Self-protection will kick in and they'll say, no, we're going to change the law. We're not going to let you hold this sword of Damocles over our head, if that makes sense.
Well, first of all, the Republicans would have to get together on one item and agree on it. That's never going to happen. So we don't have to worry about that.
You mean self-preservation is a pretty good inspiration. You've got only one. It's my understanding only a handful of Republican legislators would be opposed to something like that. But again, that's where the negotiations come in. You'd have to lobby the few good legislators and hopefully maybe the Democrats in order to prevent this bill, in order to prevent, say, the governor and the speaker from just shoving it through to abolish primaries altogether. So the negotiations part would definitely there would require some negotiation there.
They would. They would.
Otherwise, they just steamroll us because that's the other thing. There's moral authority and then there's political power. We may have the moral authority, but they have the political power. They control the courts, they control the legislature process, and the law enforcement. So in that sense, we have to be realist. Conservatives are realistic about these sort of things. What would you say? What would you say, Norine, is the most important saying? Some of the most important things that you would like to see done over the next 2 years?
Well, first of all, elect me for second vice chair and put me in charge of the grassroots, and let's get the conservatives elected after they went through all those steps, and let's get rid of the rhinos down at the Capitol, and let's get our majority in great terms again. Right now we're at 5 maybe. We're going to probably lose 2 or 3 in 26. So are we going to be even? Are we going to even be in the majority anymore? I don't know. But we really need to get our butts together in 2026 and get all the grassroots as much help as we can and get them in office. Because we can't keep voting the way we're voting. I mean, look at this last session. It was a disgrace. And we had some really good election bills in there. And they just went by the wayside because we have people down at the Capitol that don't give a care. Trump wants paper ballots. Kemp is against it. So is Josh. So why are they still in office? Trump won because people wanted him in to do what he's going to do. He wants paper ballots, one-day voting, hand counted. That's what every state should do because 2020 was stolen from Trump. And I'm going to say that loud and clear because it was.
Why do you think Josh introduced that bill when he was in the legislature to get rid of the Diebold machines and go back to paper ballots.
When did he do that?
Back when he was in the state senate. You
Well,
remember back when he was the legislature, we were always sending ideas to him,
yep,
and he was always introducing them. It was kind of a he was the only legislator
yep,
who would introduce a bill. If somebody had an idea they bring
yep.
to him, he would say, "Sure, I'll introduce that bill for you."
Yep. Back when he was a senator, he was a good guy. I mean, he did all this stuff that was right. His voting score was fantastic. He gets into the GOP, bought off by Kemp, get at that big old job. He don't care about we the people anymore. All he cares about is seeing his next step and where he's going to go in in the election, whether he's going to run for Secretary of State or whatever. All he cares about what the next person can do for him to get on a higher status.
That brings up another excellent item I wanted to get your thoughts on. 10 years ago, and even before that, when we would have votes at Republican state conventions, they were usually done by either standing vote for everything, or the chairman's race was a secret ballot or
Right.
a paper ballot, and then everything else was standing vote. Usually because people got tired as the day wore on and it took so long to count the votes. There
Yeah.
was usually a motion to say, "I move that the rest of the elections be done by standing vote," and
Yeah.
people were tired. And the other reason seemed to be that most people didn't care as much. They weren't as much invested in a race for assistant treasurer or first vice chair as they were invested in a race for chairman. So the interesting part is that when we had when in those days those of us who opposed the Watson and then and John Paget when they were chair back before
Yep.
David Schaefer became chair, those of us who were on the opposition and supported Alex Johnson,
Yep.
we usually so we were sometimes divided on the issue, but there was usually a lot of us who said we want a standing vote. We want it out here because we don't trust you to take those ballots in the back room and count them. And even though they said they'd let people come in and watch and
Yeah.
election representatives, our general attitude was, no, we want to be out here and hold you accountable. If there are rhinos voting for bad people to be leadership of the state party, we want to be able to see who they are. The unspoken
Yeah.
reason is
Yeah.
that we could vote you out of the next election. Like if you vote for that horrible chairman and we live in the same county as you do, if we take over the party next time, we're going to make sure you're not a state delegate. We don't want to elect people who are going to represent us badly as state delegates. So usually we said we didn't want people to vote, to be voting secretly because our position was we should have accountability. You should be held accountable for who you're supporting for chairman and, be willing to face the consequences. Um,
Yeah.
and so that was our position for the longest time.
Yeah. It was.
And so what has changed, you think, in the mind of some people to move away from that?
I think with the 2020 elections being stolen, I think it woke people up how election you can cheat on elections that we probably didn't think about that before. But I think that we should have a paper ballot for the chair and the two vice chairs. Um, and maybe all the contested races are just those, and the rest could be standing votes. But for the higher levels, we should always have a paper ballot. But I know remember that when Alex was running and we were arguing that because we thought at that time they could, change it. But I think now people are more aware that the elections can get stolen. I mean, even in counties, if you have a standing vote, they use it as intimidation, and people will not stand up because they're afraid to get on camera or get intimidated a lot more than they used to be. But when Alex ran, we didn't care, man. We wanted him in. Of course, we lost, but we tried our hardest. But I think,
Why do you think we care? Why do you think that the intimidation factor only works in one direction and not another? In other words, if you have a good county chairman and a majority of the delegation is good people in your particular county, why wouldn't the intimidation factor work in our favor for the 5 out of 50 people, let's say, in your delegation? If 10 of them are weak, what's to say that the rest of us can't, we won't intimidate them to vote with us, so that it could go both ways. Why do you think it only goes in one direction?
I don't think it goes in one direction. I think it goes in both directions. I think people get intimidated and won't stand because they're afraid of what could happen to them or what people say. Just for instance, if somebody votes for a chair and they look at each other and go, I ain't standing because I don't want to be on camera. They get really intimidated. And same with the other party. I mean, people use a lot more personal stuff than they used to. Everybody has a cell phone in their hand. Everybody can record everything. And people can take, oh, look at this person. They stood for this person. They said they vote for this person. And it's just a vicious circle. So if we have paper ballots and go back to secret ballots and nobody knows what the other person voted for, and there's a little security there.
Yeah, well, yeah, that the other problem is that most people know who they're voting for, and a lot of times they put their stickers on too. So the
Absolutely.
whole, the whole, the number of people who are actually anonymous in their votes, even if they're voting with the ballot, is pretty small because most people are wearing a sticker for either one candidate or another.
Yeah.
And even those who aren't wearing a sticker, their fellow delegates are probably 90% sure who they voted for.
Yeah.
And so there's for most of us, we wear our candidate sticker. It's probably 80% or more of the delegates wear their candidate sticker. The other, most of the remaining 20 are known because they're kind of like the way they talk, who they talk to,
Yeah.
who they're sitting with. Like, okay, he's your friend. Yeah, all three of his best friends in politics support one candidate and he's sitting with them. He's like, yeah, he's going to vote with them almost certainly. So there's not as many, people who haven't already declared themselves as we might think. Probably 95% of the convention or more is pretty much more or less declared who they're supporting, even if they're voting with a secret ballot. So you got that to go with. Plus it's a lot harder to manufacture fake bodies to make stand up than it is to drop a bunch of extra ballots into a bucket. When they take those buckets away, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to drop a slip ballots into a bucket, fake votes, than it is to manufacture zombies to get up and vote. Although I will say this, they certainly have a lot of zombies who vote in Congress.
Oh, isn't that the truth? I
It's
mean,
like Bob Hope used to joke about that, about there are these zombies out there. You see them sometimes, blurry-eyed, taking orders blindly,
yeah.
not knowing what they're doing, not caring. And Bob Hope says,
Yep.
"You mean like Democrats?"
Yep. 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 Yep.
So,
Yep.
so
But
what do you think? So, how was this? How have you observed as you are coming to this election? What are people telling you is the thing that's most on their minds as far as what they're most concerned about?
well, they're concerned about transparency and not having a say in the Georgia GOP party anymore. Because of the ink, it has really got a lot of people twisted. And it has to be fixed. Okay, for instance, this crazy NDA, that 9-page communist paper that was just sent out, it is from the GOP.inc. The Inc. does not have members. So, how does the corporation have a list of delegates that we can't have unless we sign that horrible NDA? Explain that to me.
You think, yeah, the non-disparagement clause has caused a lot of people to say that that's ridiculous. That's way too much. It's unprecedented to say that the language in the non-disparagement clause is way too broad. And after all, you're running for office. You are going to have to at some point say something disparaging about something.
Exactly. But I'm not going to sign anything that puts my family in jeopardy for $25,000 for each incident that you say about the Georgia GOP. Um, I'm not doing it. So I don't need the delegate list. I think I have enough people out there to help supporting me. So if you're watching this, vote for Norine Cantor, second vice chair of the Georgia GOP. Gotcha. So, yes, I am not signing it at all. And I don't think anybody in their right mind would sign it unless they have $25,000 sitting around. Say you say something about Josh, and then you say something about whoever the first vice chair is. I don't even know. And what's her name? The secretary. I don't know. say you say something about each one of those things and you say that, sign that thing, and Josh and his minions start going, oh wow, she's got 4 already, she's up to $100,000, we need to take her to court in Fulton County, and guess what, she can't have a jury trial. But you know what, I think it takes away our rights, but the corporation doesn't have any rights. So it really doesn't take any rights away from us. And I know if I signed that thing and I said something bad and they came after me, they'd try to get their money out by blood if they had to. They would make me sell my house, whatever. I totally agree that they're out to stop the grassroots from getting the delegate list, and it's total voter intimidation.
Most of the candidates most of the delegates are the same people as came last year. So if anyone has a list from 2024 and they were using it, they would probably be talking to 80% of the audience too, which just makes another reason why it doesn't make a lot of sense to squabble over this relatively small number of new delegates when the information is out there for others to access. All the candidates who ran last year have it, including David Cross, for example. He's got the delegate list because he ran for national committee man.
Yeah.
So he's got probably 80% of the delegates or more, because that's, probably 10 to 20% are new, have never been to a convention, and the
Yeah.
rest are people who've been before. And so they're would already be on the list. So it does seem a lot to be arguing over this. I've always thought the delegate lists that people, when they become delegates, should basically treated as like they're a public official, in the sense that you're now, people can contact you,
Yep.
tough. It's like, okay, you get a few more emails. I get hundreds of emails a day, 90% of whom I may get 500 emails in a day, and I may read 10 of them. 10 of them may actually be for me. So a few extra emails, more or less, isn't. And if you can also click unsubscribe. So it's not, seems to me that, and I remember this back when we were on the state committee many years ago. When I was on the state committee, we argued over this. They said, well, we should take this list off, or we should do that. And we said, don't be ridiculous. This is delegates. Delegates, they're going to be contacted. They know it. They're candidates who need their support. So, big deal. If it's, I never could understand why people were saying, oh, we don't want people to email us. We don't want people to contact us. And I never could understand that. And I never could understand why people were afraid to vote for who they voted for and let people know, because 90% of the time people already know who you're going to vote for. They've already figured it out, either by the sticker you're wearing or the vibes you're giving off.
Yeah.
And it also struck me as almost kind of a defeatist mentality, the mentality of, well, somebody may punish me later, but that's a defeatist mentality. The correct mentality to have is, I'm going to vote for who I want to and think is right. And if I'm worried that they're going to try to punish me next time and not let me be a delegate, well, then I'll just get my friends together. We'll take over the party, and so that a winner's mindset. I'll take over my local party next year, so they can't punish me. I'll get them before they get me. But that's the other factor too in all this. I think that you have to remember is that back in the day, we had a real distinction, a real big fight between, you had people who just wanted to get along, and you had people who wanted to fight. But now those distinctions are somewhat more blurred, and you have two groups of people who are pretty right wing on most of the issues. Like Josh is for paper ballots for regular elections, and so is Cross. The differences aren't as stark as they used to be. So I wonder if maybe that's what's causing some of these internal fights and attacks, is that there's less to disagree on policy, and so it becomes more about these smaller issues. But the other thing I think that's different, Norine, from 10 years ago, is that 10 years ago, it was harder to get on a state delegate list because there were more people who wanted to go to state convention.
Yep.
Last year was the lowest turnout in almost 20 years. And so nowadays, even if people want to keep you off the list, the intimidation factor you talked about, they really can't, because it says all alternates have to be promoted if there's spots for them.
Exactly.
And because so few people sign up to go, basically, no matter who you are, you're going to get, if you get on the list as a delegate or alternate, you have about a if you're a delegate, you're definitely going to get on. You have about a 90% chance to get on as a delegate
Yep.
and about an 85% chance of getting elevated if you're an alternate. So due to the low turnout, I
Yep.
don't really think the intimidation factor is a thing is could be said to be a thing anymore just because they can't keep you from running. They can't keep you from being a delegate. The whole intimidation is they'll kick me off the list next year, but they can't because, I
Hmm.
mean, in my county, we have such a huge delegation. Everybody wants to go, can go. We
Yep.
have people who are for probably 85% of my county, 85 to 90+% of my county delegation is for Josh McCoon.
Yeah.
But because there's so many people, there's so many spots, those who support David Cross, they're delegates too, because it's not like, oh, we can exclude one faction or another. We don't, there are not enough people. We don't have enough people to fill the spots. And that's true in 90% of the county. So
Hmm.
I'm not sure if this is so much, I'm not sure if the intimidation factor is as much of a factor anymore. I think it's more of a vibe. Like some people just really like paper ballots because they like it in this election, so why not have it there too? And others are more like it's just more efficient to stand and let's just get this over with. I'm not sure it's so much of a matter of, well, I want my vote to be secret because I'm an elected delegate. I don't
Yeah.
have the right, as a delegate representing my county, I don't have a right to privacy. you know, I don't have the right to privacy any more than a legislator has a right to privacy. I don't have the right to say you can't see how I represented you any more than that McCullum guy, that guy you ran against, would
Yeah.
have a right to tell you I don't have a right. You don't have a right to see how I vote in the legislature. That's my private vote. You'd call him every dirty name you could think of. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we won't go there, but yes, I have watched his voting record, and yes, I have reached out to him. But um, yeah, people just maybe it's people just are starting to just think that since Trump won, we're all good and we don't need to worry about anything anymore. But they don't realize that 2026 is a really big race. All our constitutional officers are up for election, every single one of them. And who's going to be our governor if we don't watch it? It's going to be a Democrat.
2025 is a special election for public service commissioner,
Oh yeah.
You got
After,
those two.
I don't think about those little small elections, but that's important.
They got two in November, that special election that was ordered. You have two for those in those two seats. And if the Democrats win those, that will give them a huge momentum boost going into 2026. They're going to spend a
Yeah.
lot of money on those.
Yep, they do, and they all stick together.
It'll prove if they could win one or two of those, either one of those, it'll prove that they've got momentum going into 26. It'll prove they can get out the vote, win a statewide election, that 2020 wasn't just a fluke. They could, 2020 could be written off as a fluke and the 2022 could be written off as a bad candidate. We didn't have the best general election candidate, Herschel Walker. He had a lot of baggage. But so the Democrats haven't really, they haven't, if they could win a stand up vote, a real election with two good candidates on each side, not just, a weak candidate versus strong candidate, if they could win that, that would give them a lot of momentum. So, that's a huge, I'm worried about that. We really have to focus on getting people to turn out the vote for this November. Otherwise, they could take those two seats and win a ton of momentum.
I haven't really heard a lot about it. How come? How come Josh isn't out there beating the doors saying or sending things? Hey, we need to support this guy in November. I mean, probably a lot of us on here probably don't even realize what those elections were coming up. I mean, I knew there was special, but I didn't know what was going on. Um, but people don't pay attention to special elections because
Yeah.
people aren't getting out there and tooting their horn and saying, "Hey, this really matters. We've got."
The state party isn't doing it yet because people won't pay attention until about a month before the election. You know how it is. You tell
That,
people something now, they'll completely forget about it. It'll fly out their ear until most people think about elections about 2 weeks to a month before the election. So almost anything you tell the general public before then is almost wasted airtime.
but if you get out there and you canvas hard and you do it more than once, twice, do it a couple times and then do it like a month before the election and then do it 2 weeks before the election and get it drilled into people's heads, and that would probably help. But I don't really know anything about these elections, so I think it needs to get word out that this could be really a catalyst to 2026 if we lose these two seats.
It's a rehearsal. It's a full
It,
scale dress rehearsal war game for 2026 with real ammunition.
absolutely.
Tim Eccles and Fritz Johnson are running for in those two seats. Tim's representing East Georgia, and you got Fritz as the downtown Atlanta district, the Metro Donut area, and you got and Eccles has an opponent in the primary, a guy from Columbia County. Fritz is unopposed in the primary in June, but he got a November special election with
Yeah.
only Republican and Democrat. The Libertarians lost ballot access after the last election here in Georgia, so it's going to be a two-way race. And 2026 is going to be a two-way race, by the way, something that folks should be happy about in this respect. We're not going to have any runoffs in 2026 guaranteed because only the Republicans and the Democrats have ballot access at this point. So we're not going to have a December runoff. Whoever wins in November wins in November. And this, for the first time, we have that advantage because the Libertarian vote won't be peeling away from us.
Interesting. So, what are we going to do to get the word out to help get behind these people and start helping them? If because like you said, it's going to be a catalyst for 2026 and it's going to be a trial run. If we lose this, the Democrats are going to come in and go, oh wow, we got this, we've won two, we can take them, and they're going to come in with everything they've got to destroy us.
To do the same thing we did in Wisconsin, and we'll have Elon and Charlie Kirk and Turning Point. We had set some people from Coweta go up to Wisconsin and volunteer with Turning Point in that judicial election.
Yeah.
We'll have to have the effort, same effort here in Georgia and more in order to win. And I'm sure President Trump will do some rallies here, at least one or two, to help turn out the vote. It's a really big thing that we have to deal with. So
I'm not sure if Trump will come.
I hope he will. It's very important that we not lose Georgia in 26. It's the only Senate seat. But Josh talks about this all the time. He says that John Ossoff is the only Democrat senator that we have a really good shot of defeating in 2026 as an incumbent. There's a few others where we have a little bit of a chance, but realistically, Georgia is the top pickup opportunity. And the only other one that would be close to that would probably be the state of Michigan, maybe Michigan, but yeah, Michigan would be the secondary one, but that's way behind Georgia in terms of likelihood of victory. So Georgia's the top target. I would think that would make Trump more interested than if we were just a, random state, a random swing state. We're in a unique position here. So, well, great. So what would you say, is the one or two things that you'd like to leave people with that you would like to help local parties with personally? Say as vice chair, you want to make yourself available to do what?
Well, when I win second vice chair, I want to be available to all the county chairs to start the process of getting America First grassroots candidates at least ready for office, get them vetted. I have a plan. It's called Grassroots 2026 I'm working on. So if I win, hopefully I will, then I will work with all the county chairs and we will try to get people that want to run for office, but they're a little afraid to maybe help them out and get them in office, because people that really don't want to run for office are actually the best people that should run for office.
People offer their time and service, and then they find out that in order to serve, they have to go through this gauntlet of politics where people lie about them, say ridiculous things, where, people who just sit behind a keyboard and criticize from the sidelines will blather on about how awful people they are. And they think to themselves, why should I subject myself and my family to this horrible, abuse
Yeah.
in order just to have the privilege of service? So I have to beg people for the privilege of giving my time and my service and take this kind of character assassination in the meantime. You could see why a lot of people would say, no, thank you. I'll just be a donor or serve on a board or a volunteer thing, something like that. I don't need to put my family through this. It is a system that does seem to reward people who don't mind being called all kinds of names or people who frankly are such scoundrels. It doesn't matter what you call them because they're used to it. You know, decent, intelligent people who have a lot to offer. Those are the ones who seem to be turned off by a lot of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. Politics is a blood sport. It really is. And you have to be strong and you have to want to do it. And you have to have a servant's heart because it's actually serving the people. And not all people want to do it or cut out to do it, but there's always those people that go, oh man, if I could run for office and change things, maybe those are the people I want to reach. That, like, I did not want to run for second vice chair. I'm just going to totally be transparent here. I did not want to run. My friend came up and said about 4 months ago, she said, you're going to run for second vice chair of state. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not getting to that mess. There's no way. Well, then people.
Why didn't you tell her, well, then you should run, Mary or Sue or whoever it was?
No. And then so I had these people keep asking me, why don't you run for second? Why don't you run for second? I'm going, nope, not, nope, nope, nope. And then I got a call from a good friend to ask me. And then I went, okay, God, I got it. So that's why I'm running, because God called me to run and you don't turn God down. So, that's why I'm saying people that don't want to run for office maybe are the best people to run for office because they're not tainted by all the crap that's going on in the political world, because it's a doggy dog world. And if you don't have tons of money and a tons of support, you're not going to get anywhere. That's what I'm trying to change, because money shouldn't buy elections, but it does. And I'm perfectly I know about that because my opponent raised a heck of a lot of money and I didn't raise much. But I did reach a good bit of people, but maybe that's what I was supposed to do. But we've got to reach people that want to run for office but are scared to. We have to empower them, um, because you just never know what kind of a person would be when they get into there. They might turn out to be the best person. It might be another Colton Moore. Oh, and speaking of Colton Moore, I totally support Colton Moore. What he went through was horrible. Burt Jones should have stood right by his side outside and said, you can't touch my person. But we won't go there. But I support Colton and Charlize, the ones that we have down there. And I can't remember their name, but we've only got a few down there. And we need to get more involved in the Freedom Caucus and have good candidates like Colton and Charlize. Maybe they could actually sponsor somebody that wants to run and help them get elected. I don't know. We'll just wait and see. We just don't know what's out there until we start looking.
Yes. Where can people learn, contact you? Are you active on any signal chats? Do you have a website, a Facebook page, any way for folks to get in touch with you? That's the best way.
Yeah, you can go to NorineForGeorgia.com. That's my website. I do have a Facebook page. I think it's called Norine Second Vice Chair or something, but it's on my personal web page. I'm on Twitter. It's under Norine Cantor. Signal chat. I don't have a signal chat. I don't do a lot of social media. I've been told I should, but I don't.
I think you made the right call. Social media is overrated.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not, but I'm going to have to get out there since I don't have the delegate list. I'm going to have to start getting out there and make little videos, and try to reach people. But I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, send me your information. I'll send it out for you, because I'm a county chair and I think the people deserve to see what you're all about. So even without the delegate list, I'm reaching a lot of people because, as you know, Brent, I've been in the GRA for a while. I've never compromised on my morals or standards, and I've never gone the wrong way. And I always stand up for what's right, even if I have to stand up alone. You know that.
Well, I appreciate you spending so much time and telling us about what you'd like to see done and your services and in your role, both of serving as a officer, but also the direction you'd like to see the party go and who you prefer to serve in these various roles going forward as well. I appreciate it very much. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.